Welcome to Propeller Breeze, the show for student pilots, sim fans, and everyone chasing that first solo and beyond. All information in this podcast is for entertainment and general knowledge only. Always verify with certified flight instructors or regulatory authorities before attempting anything mentioned here.
Picture this. You are a student pilot, right? You are on final approach to the runway.
Oh, a stressful moment for anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The runway numbers are getting bigger in the windshield, but when you check your instruments, you realize you've descended below your intended glide path. You are too low. So what is your very first instinct? Do you pull back on the yoke? Or do you reach for the throttle?
Well, it is the ultimate test of a pilot's reflexes. And the terrifying reality is that our human survival instinct almost always provides the exact wrong answer to that split-second question.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this, because today we are pulling from a fascinating excerpt of The Principles of Aerial Energy Error Management. And our mission here is to completely rewire how you, the student pilot, think about flying.
Getting away from just chasing the instrument.
Exactly. We're going to stop reacting to the altimeter and the airspeed indicator as, two separate annoying needles that you constantly have to chase around the dashboard. Instead, we're going to start treating your airplane as one unified system of energy.
Because it really is just one system.
Yeah, and the text makes this compelling case that many in-flight emergencies don't begin with, like a dramatic, catastrophic engine failure. They start with a simple, ignored deviation in your path or your speed that slowly compounds until you're just out of options.
And stopping that snowball effect requires a fundamental mental shift. Before we can safely fix a bad approach, we have to actually understand what those dials on the dashboard are telling us about the physical reality of the airplane.
Right, what's actually happening out on the wings.
Exactly. The text establishes a profound baseline here. The airplane's total energy is distributed over two specific things: altitude and airspeed.
Just those two?
Just those two. When you deviate from your target altitude or your target speed, you aren't just a little high or a little fast. You are experiencing what the author defines as an energy error.
I was actually trying to wrap my head around this concept, translating altitude and speed into pure energy. And I thought of an analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
So if the airplane's total energy is our total financial wealth, like our net worth, is altitude kind of like our long-term savings account, and airspeed is like the liquid cash in our checking account?
Oh, I like that. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the physics at play here. Your total wealth in the cockpit is the combination of both of those accounts.
Right.
Altitude is your stored potential energy. You have literally burned fuel and done physical work to climb away from the Earth, and you have banked that energy for a rainy day.
You've made a deposit.
Exactly, a deposit. Airspeed, on the other hand, is your kinetic energy. It is the liquid cash you need to pay the immediate second-by-second bills of keeping the airplane flying and the wings generating lift right now.
So just like with real money, you can move funds between those accounts. If I'm flying along and I pitch the nose up, I am taking money out of my liquid checking account, I'm bleeding off airspeed, and I am depositing it into my savings account, which means I gain altitude.
Yep. And that transfer of wealth is happening continuously. A pilot is always acting on the airplane's energy state, whether they realize it or not.
It's unavoidable.
Totally.
Yeah.
For a student pilot working on their private pilot license, truly internalizing that altitude and airspeed are just different currencies of the exact same underlying wealth is a massive mental breakthrough.
Because you stop looking at them in isolation.
Exactly. It forces you to look at the whole picture. If you just stare at the altimeter in isolation and panic because you are 50 feet low, you might make a drastic control input that completely bankrupts your airspeed just to fix your altitude.
Which brings us directly to the core framework of the source material. Building on that bank account analogy, how do we know if we are entirely out of money, like completely broke, or if we just have our money sitting in the wrong accounts?
Well, the text provides a really good diagnostic tool called the energy state matrix to help us decode what the dashboard is really saying.
Okay, the matrix. How does that work?
The matrix categorizes these deviations into two very specific types of energy errors. The first type is the total energy error.
This is the scenario where you are actually broke, or I suppose entirely too rich.
Yeah, both extremes apply. In a total energy error, your altitude and your speed are deviating in the exact same direction.
Okay, so both needles doing the same thing.
Right. For example, you are lower than your target glide path, and you are also flying slower than your target airspeed. Both needles are pointing down. The text refers to this condition as being lower and slower.
Makes sense.
Conversely, you could be higher and faster, where both needles are pointing up.
Meaning I have fundamentally too little total energy or way too much total energy.
That is the physical reality. And the fix for a total energy error relies strictly on the throttle.
Oh, strictly the throttle.
Strictly. Because you lack total energy, you must physically introduce new energy into the system by pushing the throttle forward. If you have too much, you must remove energy from the system by pulling the throttle back.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. If my altimeter says I'm low, my primal survival instinct as a human being is to just pull back on the yoke. I see the ground getting closer, and I want to pull back to get away from the ground.
Naturally.
Why is that instinct so dangerous if I haven't checked my airspeed first?
What's fascinating here is the deadly physical trap that survival instinct sets up. We have to look at what the yoke actually does. Moving the yoke does not create energy.
It just moves it around.
Right, it only transfers it. Pulling back on the yoke only fixes the second type of error, which the text calls an energy distribution error.
Meaning I have the right amount of total wealth, but it's just in the wrong account. My altitude and speed needles are deviating in opposite directions.
Exactly that inverse relationship. You might be higher and slower, meaning you have too much altitude but too little speed, or you might be lower and faster, with too little altitude but excess speed.
So the total amount of energy is fine in those cases.
Yes, the total energy is actually fine. You fix a distribution error by transferring the funds. You exchange the energy by simply pitching the nose up or down with the elevator.
So going back to my survival instinct, if I am lower and slower, which is a total energy error where I am totally broke, and I panic and pull back on the yoke, what actually happens to the airplane?
You are asking the airplane to give you altitude from a checking account that is already overdrawn.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's a bad idea.
Very bad. You don't have the kinetic speed to trade. Pulling back on the yoke just robs you of your remaining vital airspeed without fixing the root problem, which is a lack of total energy.
Right, because you haven't added any throttle.
Exactly. You haven't added a single drop of new energy to the system. You have just moved your poverty around. In a light aircraft, running out of airspeed close to the ground while pulling back on the yoke is the mechanical recipe for an aerodynamic stall and to spin.
That paints a terrifying but incredibly clear picture. Let's take this matrix and apply it to a real-world scenario that every student pilot sweats over.
Okay, lay it on me.
You are on short final approach. The runway is right there. Let's say you check your instruments and you are dangerously below your glide path. You are too low. But your airspeed indicator is pegged high. You are screaming in way too fast.
Okay, based on the matrix, that is a classic energy distribution error. The text calls this scenario D. The altitude is low, but the airspeed is high. The needles are opposing each other.
So I have the total energy I need to reach the runway. It is just all sitting in my kinetic checking account right now.
Yep, the aircraft possesses excess kinetic energy. The text outlines that the fix here is to null the distribution error by utilizing the elevator. You gently pull back on the yoke.
Just a little back pressure.
Right, you trade that excess speed to climb back up to your intended glide path, regaining the altitude.
The pitch transfers the kinetic energy back into potential energy. I bleed off the excess speed, I float back up to the proper height, and I'm back on a stabilized approach.
No throttle adjustments necessary.
Exactly. The total energy state was already correct, so the throttle remains entirely untouched in that specific correction. Okay, well, let's look at the much scarier side of that coin. Scenario B. I am on that same final approach. I am just as low. The trees at the end of the runway are looking massive.
Not a good feeling.
No. But this time, I look at my airspeed indicator, and the needle is dropping. I am bleeding airspeed, I am lower, and I am slower.
You are facing a total energy error. Both parameters are decaying. You are broke.
Pitching up to clear the trees will just drain my last bit of airspeed and stall the plane. I need to introduce new energy, so as a pilot, I just shove the throttle forward to the firewall, get that engine roaring, and climb out of danger. Seems simple enough.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of aerodynamics, it usually is that simple. You add power, you gain energy, unless, however, you have badly mismanaged your energy for too long.
Wait, there's an exception.
Yes, and this brings us to the most sobering caution detailed in the source material. There is a specific condition where advancing the throttle suddenly stops working.
Hold on, let me make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Pushing the throttle forward, introducing more fuel to the engine, just doesn't add energy to the airplane.
The text introduces a highly dangerous state called the very slow condition.
Okay.
If you are lower and slower, and you fail to recognize it, allowing your airspeed to decay until you reach this very slow threshold, the physical rules of how the airplane interacts with the air radically change.
How so? I mean, thrust is thrust, isn't it? If the propeller is pulling, shouldn't I be gaining energy?
Not if the drag completely overwhelms it. When an airplane gets incredibly slow, it doesn't simply glide through the air like a dart anymore.
It gets mushy.
Very mushy. To generate enough lift to keep the heavy aircraft from falling out of the sky at that sluggish speed, you are forced to fly at a very high angle of attack. You are essentially pointing the nose of the plane high into the air, exposing the entire flat belly of the wing to the oncoming relative wind.
It's like sticking your hand out the window of a moving car on the highway and tilting your palm upward.
Yeah.
You instantly feel that massive wall of air pushing your hand back.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
That resistance you feel is a byproduct of lift, specifically called induced drag. At high angles of attack, the high-pressure air under the wing spills aggressively over the wingtips, creating massive vortices that drag the airplane backward.
And that drag just cancels out the engine.
It does more than cancel it out.
Yeah.
The text explicitly warns that in the very slow condition, this induced drag becomes so astronomically high that your available excess power might actually become negative.
Negative excess power. So you push the throttle all the way forward, the engine is screaming at 100% of its rated horsepower, the propeller is biting the air as hard as it can.
And all of that thrust is completely consumed by the drag.
Right.
The text denotes this state as PS being less than 0. The engine just cannot overcome the aerodynamic wall you have built with that high angle of attack.
So the throttle is useless there.
Completely useless. Pushing the throttle forward in that specific, very slow condition does absolutely nothing to increase your surplus energy. You are physically trapped behind the power curve.
Man, that is the stuff of pilot nightmares. If pushing the throttle all the way to the firewall doesn't give me the energy I desperately need to climb away from the ground, what on earth is the fix?
The only recourse, according to the strict principles of energy management, is a counterintuitive physical input. You must first push forward on the yoke.
Let me stop you there. If my altimeter says I am dangerously close to the ground and I have 0 airspeed, you are telling me the laws of physics demand that I actively push the nose of the airplane down toward the dirt I am already about to hit.
This raises an important question about trusting aerodynamics over primal fear. Yes, pushing the nose down when you are low is terrifying. But remember the bank account.
Okay, the debt.
Right. You have accumulated a massive, crippling debt of induced drag. You cannot generate new income thrust until you eliminate that drag. By pushing forward on the yoke, you trade whatever meager altitude you have left for a slight increase in speed. More importantly, you drastically lower your angle of attack.
You are unchoking the wing, you flatten it out so it slices through the air again instead of plowing through it like a bulldozer.
Exactly. You eliminate the wall of drag. And only then, the text states, can you advance the throttle forward and have that thrust actually convert into regaining total energy. You have to sacrifice altitude to buy the aerodynamic efficiency necessary for the engine's power to become effective again.
But what if you are already at like 200 feet? What if you are on short final, you get caught in this very slow trap, and you literally do not have the altitude to sacrifice?
The text addresses that edge case reality with chilling clarity. It plainly states that if the airplane is too close to the ground when this condition develops, there may simply not be enough vertical room to reverse the negative energy rate before you strike the ground.
Wow. So by the time you realize you need to push the nose down to break the drag, you might just run out of sky.
That is the grim reality of physics. It underscores exactly why early recognition of these energy errors is literally a matter of life and death. You cannot let a minor, lower, and slower deviation silently degrade into the very slow trap.
Especially when you are operating at the edges of the flight envelope near the ground.
Precisely.
That is a heavy but incredibly vital lesson for anyone training for their license. Let's shift gears from that extreme danger back to a more nuanced but probably much more common daily flying scenario. What if you only have half a problem?
Yes. The source material outlines this specific complexity beautifully. Imagine you are on approach and you are sinking below your desired flight path. Your altitude is wrong.
Okay.
But you check your airspeed indicator, and you are flying at the perfectly correct target speed.
So my airspeed deviation is 0. If I look at the matrix, I have a loss of altitude, but no loss of speed. It doesn't neatly fit into a pure total error because both needles aren't moving, and it's not a pure distribution error because they aren't moving in opposite directions.
Right. The text identifies this specific scenario as a combination error. Because one parameter is off while the other is perfect, you are facing a combination of a total energy deficit and a distribution imbalance simultaneously.
So what does this all mean for the student pilot's hands on the controls? If I'm low, I need to go up. But if my speed is perfect, I really don't want to mess that up. If I pull back on the yoke to get my altitude back, I'm going to bleed off that perfect speed.
Exactly. You would turn your combination error into a pure total energy error. You would fix the altitude, but ruin your airspeed in the process.
And if I just shove the throttle forward to add the missing energy?
The airplane will simply accelerate in level flight. You would fix the total energy deficit, but now you have a speed distribution problem. You are flying too fast for your approach.
Okay, so I can't just pitch and I can't just power. I have to isolate the variables. I'm effectively trying to decouple my altitude from my airspeed. I want to change my altitude while deliberately protecting my speed.
Decoupling is the exact terminology that text uses, and executing that requires coordinated simultaneous action with both hands.
To both hands at the same time?
Yep. You must advance the throttle forward to add the total energy required to regain the altitude while simultaneously easing aft on the yoke.
I see. The throttle provides the raw new energy to climb, and the subtle back pressure on the yoke acts like a router, directing that new energy exclusively into gaining altitude, keeping the speed perfectly constant.
That's a great way to put it. Regaining altitude without altering your speed demands that coordinated dance between both controls. And the text outlines one final crucial step to all of this energy management.
What's that?
Making these corrections with the throttle and elevator only fixes the short-term deviations.
Right, because if I am holding back pressure on the yoke to maintain my new corrected glide path, my arm is going to get tired really fast. I have to make the correction stick.
The text emphasizes that once the short-term deviations are corrected, the airplane must be trimmed for long-term control.
Ah, the trim wheel.
Yes. Use the trim wheel to relieve the physical control pressures so that the airplane maintains the newly reestablished path speed profile on its own. If you don't trim, the moment you relax your grip on the yoke, the airplane will naturally seek its previous incorrect energy state.
Okay, this has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. Let's summarize the core takeaway for the student pilot listener out there. You are no longer just pushing levers to chase individual annoying needles on a dashboard. You are a holistic energy manager.
A wealth manager, if we go back to your analogy.
Exactly. Your throttle manages your total wealth, and your elevator manages how that wealth is distributed between altitude and speed.
And this energy framework is completely universal. The text reminds us that this isn't just a mental exercise for landing. Pilots need to assess and mitigate these energy deviations during every single phase of flight.
Not just final approach.
Right. Traffic pattern operations, takeoffs, climbs, cruise flight, descending flight, and any maneuver involving turns. The physics of energy management do not care what phase of flight you are in.
The laws of physics apply everywhere. Understanding them is what prevents you from being backed into an aerodynamic corner where the airplane can no longer perform. Which leaves me with a final thought for you to ponder on your way to the airfield for your next flight lesson.
Oh, this should be good.
The text states that after correcting deviations, you must trim the airplane to maintain the desired path speed profile. Next time you're in the cockpit, ask yourself, when you roll that trim wheel, are you just relieving the physical pressure on your hands? Or are you actually locking in a physical save point for the airplane's delicate energy distribution? Think about how your trim wheel is secretly the most important energy management tool you have.
That is a phenomenal perspective to take into the cockpit.
Until next time, keep your energy up and your drag down.
That's it for this episode. Keep your wings level, your brain sharp, and catch you next time in the pattern. Thanks for riding with Propeller Breeze.